Hola familia. Is that too loud? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
I'm not asking you, Steve. I'm asking the baby. Are you okay with it? Is it okay? Is it a good volume?
Maybe a little lower.
Steve.
Yeah.
Buenas noches, everybody. How are y'all? Everybody good? You good, Paleta?
Very good.
You're a little tired. You okay? You're good. You have the Fresno energy in the house tonight. You're good. Real good. You're real good. Familia, for those of you that don't know why you're here, we are having a Poetics of Now, the Ancestral and Archive reading of poets. That whenever they come here is a big special thing. This is really beautiful having you here for the first time, and then having Anthony back and Chaun. And then next generation of poets. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read their bios and just get the hell out of the way. Y'all know who these people are. Technically, I need to read their bios, but I will. They all have like those them obituary-length bios. You know why? Because they've done stuff. You can see what I'm talking about. Normally, sometimes you read poets' bios and you're like, oh man, pushcart nominee. No, sorry. But this is me. This is me. This is the real thing right here, y'all. This is beautiful. These folks help us rewrite the timeline in a big way, so it's real special they're here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read everyone's bios, okay, and then get out of the way and they're going to step up. That way I don't have to interrupt the flow of the energia. So, is that cool with everybody? Okay. So, first up tonight is Chaun Webster. Chaun Webster is a poet and graphic designer living in Minneapolis, whose work is attempting to put pressure on the spatial and temporal limitations of writing, of the English language, and as a way to demonstrate its incapacity for describing blackness outside of a regime of death and dying. Webster's debut book, Gentrification, or The Scene of the Crime, was published by Naomi Press in 2018 and received the 2019 Minnesota Book Award for Poetry. Whale Song, Waiting in the Water at the End of the World, was published by Black Ocean on April 20th, sorry. Okay, and then after Chaun, we're going to have Vang. Vang is the author of Yellow Rain, put out by Grey Wolf Press in 2021, winner of the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize from the Academy of American Poets, an American Book Award, and a finalist for the 2022 Pulitzer Prize in Poetry, along with Afterland, published by Grey Wolf Press in 2017. Also the winner of the first book award from the Academy of American Poets, the recipient of a Lannan Literary Foundation. Ma's poetry has appeared in Tin House, the American Poetry Review, and Poetry, among other journals and anthologies. She teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at Fresno State. And last, but certainly not least, the one and only Anthony Cody is the author of The Rendering, put out by Omnidon this year, and Borderland Apocrypha, put out by Omnidon in 2020. It was the winner of the 2018 Omnidon Open Book Prize. That's a timeline jump, right? That's okay. That's what we're here for. Okay, good. Anthony's debut has been recognized as a winner of a 2022 Whitting Award, a 2021 American Book Award, a 2020 Southwest Book Award, and a Poet and Writer's 2020 Debut Poet. Anthony was a finalist for the National Book Award, PEN America, the Gene Stein Award, LA Times Book Award, among many others. He's a Canto Mundo Fellow from Fresno Califas, with lineage in the Bracero program and Dust Bowl. That's right! That's right! He collaborates with the one and only Juan Felipe Herrera's Laureate Lab Visual Wordless Studio, serves as a poetry editor for Omnidon, and is co-publisher of Naomi Press. Anthony teaches in the low residency MFA at Randolph College. Familia, put your hands together for these amazing poets. First up is Chaun Webster.
Hello, good evening. How is everyone? I'm just here as hype man. Yeah, I love the theme of the Ancestral, the archive, you know, and think a lot about archives and working on something, even just thinking about just how we're often times going to the archive, having to reckon with loss, having to reckon with like what is not there, right? Like the ruptures and the spaces between the breaks in the archive, and you know, it requires a kind of speculative practice often. You know, it requires a practice of imagination to rebuild so much of what is missing in the archive. So yeah, and with that thinking, I'm going to just read a few things from Whale Song, and we can maybe chop it up about it after. A word at the so-called before. If the sea is history, as Walcott tells us, then Whale Song is an attempt at beginning. If we believe in such orderings of time, there in the water, the abysmal. Here in these assemblages is a prolonged struggle to snatch something from the depths, against the belief that nothing can be recovered. I no longer believe anything can be recovered, and yet I cannot forgo the attempt. So here we are in the water, having jumped the Pequod and wading through and against anti-blackness, which is to say, an apocalyptic, extractive regime of world-making. All I see are the ruins. A billion black Anthropocenes. All I see is an ecology at its end. Let's start there. With a whale, a hunted thing, a species that once lived on land and gave it up. We don't want no fucking country neither. That's the young brand, not me. Hunted as soon as it comes up for air. Let's begin with that snatched breath. With an ocean from which and over so much has been taken and deposited, and for which the ramifications remain without grammar. Let's begin with New World blackness, the belly of the whale, the catastrophic ends entangled with its emergence, the sentient folk on the outside of the human who are designated by this signifier. Whale Song is a long meditation that aims at extended thinking and conversation with thinking at the shoreline of blackness, the non-human animal, the middle passage, and ecological disaster. It is a written gesture in all of its uncertainty of moving toward the terror, desiring something beyond the terror, while not knowing if anything lay on the other side of it. Whale Song is an attempt at care, with and for those in what Christina Sharp calls the wake. For if I cannot raise my dead, and I suspect that I cannot, then I will bear witness past the edge of ruin and will wail this world till its end. Pip jumps the Pequod after hallucinating about the human and subsequently giving up on land. Movie pitch. It begins with a fever dream. Pip haunted by the ground he stands on, something terrifying about its sureness, its carcerality. No, it begins somewhere in his torn open throat, slit wide by a harpoon, camera panning each angle of Pip's neck as he wails, "Look, a Negro." It begins with nothing, screen black, dark as the ocean floor. No, it begins with something, a body, itself both more and less than one, laying on the deck of the Pequod, attempting to float, misjudging the surface for water, mistaking his lack of sinking for buoyancy. No, it begins with a disavowal of land, with Pip tasting that salt water and it doing something like the opposite of stripping him of wings. Pip jumps the Pequod. No, it begins. How have the dead entered here? And Pip is from Melville's Moby Dick, and one of those, silent black characters in Moby Dick, and is actually in the book is thrown from the Pequod. So Pip is in this a lot, actually. To be swallowed by a great fish in the belly of the whale at the end of the world might be as good a place as any to begin. What does it mean to be in the belly of the whale? To be in the belly and the whale. This is meant to say something about being not only at the end of the world, but being itself and its zero, which is to say blackness. Somewhere in the water moves a big fish, sounds like a catch, moves like a hunted thing, its dark body. Somewhere in the water, a big fish is a gold rush, loot, mined for the resource of its dark body. Somewhere in the water, a big fish sounds like sea monster, cetacean from Katos. Its dark body, somewhere in the water as a haunt and the source of modernity, torn from its dark body. Somewhere in the water, a big fish isn't a big fish. It is trade, a ledger mark. Its dark body, somewhere in the water as a metaphor, a fact of capital registered from its dark body. And there are bodies that are mined, dismembered, distortions of distortion, situated solely as function, not persons. Perhaps here I will disclose my disavowal of humanist terms, that category holds its shape by way of the figure of the Negro doing the double work of being border for the human and the animal. There are no persons here, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. We are talking about bodies, the whale, and in the belly of the whale. The body is a fiction. What of the flesh? 1. A child born in the water may take longer to draw breath before they wake. We often dream of flying, a kind of weightlessness that carries us up, 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 up. We know we are dreaming. Outside the world of the dream, we are afraid of heights. Careful to not look down, can feel our body mass, heavy, salt blood. The people could fly until they couldn't. Salt kept us closer to the water. The water is the birthplace of New World blackness. Blackness ain't just in the water. Blackness is the water, in which the fevered hands attend to the body, beguile asphyxiation of its abstract work. Walcott taught us that the sea is history, that interwoven into the depths are countless stories, actual bones. There was a time when we had belief, when we were a believer in a kind of delivery. Not this body, no, but something animating this flesh would be delivered, that the bones could be gathered. There was a time when we believed, when we, being delivered, had belief that we had been born again. There are many births, as there are many bellies of the world. wherein Pip considers advising Ahab to lose his human coordinates, but jumps the Pequod instead. Movie pitch. Scene begins with Pip approaching Ahab, a slow walk meant to dramatize the long degree of silence, the absented speech that forms Pip's there and not there-ness, the measured movements of contraband, each step an appeal to remain obscure, for the thing you are is smuggled, each a secret opened as the water. And then midway to Ahab, Pip gives attention to the sea, its sound, the applause of waves crashing against themselves, the din of the deep having its own syntactical order. And suddenly, without saying a word, language being a fraught thing, a jagged tool, Pip looks back only to offer a wry smile. And with no maps to guide them, Pip jumps the Pequod, back arched as a dorsal fin, marine opening up with the stammer of uncountable life forms shifting in and out of each other, and somewhere out in the blue basement of the earth, somewhere surrounded by the cold cellar with no more than the drink visible, Pip emerges like air and sound, and all of that, a world. 2. Our partner gave birth to our child fully submerged in the water. The first few moments suspended. Once removed from the water, it took a while before the child would breathe. The doctor said this is normal. Sometimes we wonder if black children are already aware of a world set on making their breathing an impossibility. We count so many years in the seconds before a first breath, something like a living death, a middle passage. We name our child Ocean. Water is the weather, is the wake, is the wade. Water is the work, is the whale, is the world. In the wake of the body, the baptism. In the wake is a world. Ocean cries a full-throated cry, a rattle, long and full. Do not hold the child too tightly. Do not squeeze them. We make assessments of a lifetime of danger, something like scanning the water for sharks, an English name for a strange fish, a nomenclature developed by merchants over years on the water, attempting to make it others so that the so-called human could hold its shape. Shark from choke, pronounced choke from the Maya in the Caribbean. We gasp. Do not hold the child too tightly. There are sharks in the water. Is a child of the water aboard the vessel a child at all? What is left in the unchild's wake? What is left in the unmaking of the child? Which is to say, what is left in the unmaking of childhood when the rent is too high for us to find lodging there? This is not an argument around innocence. The child is not innocent, a hollow word, an imaginary border. The child is an ocean, which is to say, possible. Entangled with the journal of mortality, one that only sees what is assumed gone, its work. The question that compresses you is a matter of black life. The question is a matter of black death being an event or what constitutes blackness itself. If living aboard the mobile graveyard, it is to be in excess of this burial ground. If living, it is to steal breath or hide it. Blackness as excess is as close as you can approximate otherwise. For to be alive through a passage the ledger cannot see on the floating tube is to be outside logic, is to be unimaginable, something without a grammar. Who can rouse the breath like a mother or hide it like a hunted thing? A child is not awake. Breathe softer, child. Tuck our breathing beneath the water, though there be sharks there. Make something of our body itself a technology. Make a maroon, a saltwater wraith. Make an underwater country. Drexia deep in the black Atlantic. Make our body part of the storm. Unsettle the water. Wherein Pitt concludes his body is not single and self-identical, wherein Pitt determines he is also the whale and swallows the Pequod. Movie pitch. It is unclear where on this journey Pitt decided a single body was unsuitable, but each day he would work depths of 40 feet, then 80 feet, then twice that again. It begins by learning not so much to hold one's breath, but how to better distribute the oxygen, a shrinking of the spleen, a releasing of oxygen-rich blood cells. One learns to slow the heart rate. One remembers something of their self that began in the water. What if the distance between the whale and the belly of the whale were imagined, were nothing more than a myth? What if Pitt could insist on other folk tales, on an assemblage of materials and temporalities continually passing through them? Then it is not so much a stretch to say one relegated to silence. The speculative position of the non-human animal is also the whale. That Pitt could make new things of their body and swallow whole the things carrying the so-called old. It is unclear where on the journey Pitt made these new things of his body, but who rides the Pequod when they can ride the ocean? Thank you.
Hi everyone, that was a beautiful reading, Chaun. Almost forgot that I had to read next. I just listening to you read, I was thinking so much about song and just the literature as a space of archive itself, and drawing from literature and coming back to those spaces to kind of reimagine them in this current and modern context, I think is powerful. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Josiah, thanks to Medicine for Nightmares for hosting us this evening. It's great to see folks here, great to see Rebecca here too. I'm going to be reading tonight from both of my books. I'll just open up with a poem from my first book, Afterland. And I'll just start by saying that I'm the daughter of Hmong refugees, so my parents are refugees from Laos, and so this opening poem is a poem I wrote for my parents. Dear exile, never step back, never a last scent of plumeria. When my parents left, you knew it was for good. It's a herd of horses never to reclaim their steps. You became a moth hanging down from the sun. Old river calling to my mother kept spilling out of her lungs. Ridgeline vista closed into the locket of their gaze. It's the Siberian crane forbidden to fly back after winter. You marbled my father's face and floated him as a stone over the sea. Further, every minute emptying his child years to the land. You crawled back in your bomb. It's when the banyan must leave, relearn to cathedral its roots. So I'm going to switch over to Yellow Rain, and I'll share a few poems from this collection. This was a collection that for me took a sort of a big chunk of my life. I spent over a decade sort of doing a lot of research for these poems, and then of course the act of writing the poems themselves. But when Hmong refugees fled Laos following the end to the U.S. proxy wars in Vietnam and Laos, a lot of the refugees who arrived into Thailand reported that there was this mysterious yellow substance that would fall onto them, onto their skin, their clothes, the trees around them, and it would make them sick, and they didn't know what it was. And so when they got to the refugee camps, the doctors were trying to figure out what this weird, mysterious, fatal substance was. And it made them sick, but there were, like I said, they were fatal in that there were cases of people dying from it as well. And so this is, coming again at the end of the war, and the United States was no longer interested in doing anything about or interested in this region anymore. But they were really determined to find out what yellow rain was, this substance that they then coined yellow rain, primarily for political reasons, right? Because they wanted to know if they could leverage this yellow rain against the Soviets. This was all happening in the Cold War. So they wanted to say, okay, if this is the act of the Soviets, then we need to then lobby Congress to build more bombs and guns and improve our arsenal. So that's the larger context behind this thing called yellow rain. And I spent 10 years researching it through declassified documents, government reports, books, and everything, just trying to figure out what happened with this. Because in the end, as I'll share later on in these poems, the Hmong testimonies and stories of yellow rain eventually became invalidated, and they were erased, and they were discredited. It was like what had happened and what the stories had claimed were then taken away from Hmong people, because it was like, this never happened to you. So it's a very serious case of gaslighting and collective trauma that can happen on people. So let me start with one of the opening poems here. Declassified. May the dead be ever evidenced. May their clandestine names bellow from the mouth of an August monsoon. May they coax the truth from every storm. Long ago there lived a jungle whose only cloth was camouflage, and all those who came to it learned the burden of hiding. Long ago we memorized the refrains of wild birds, stitched them underneath our evacuated skins. Then man, then soldier, then vividness of saffron and canary arriving as small showers, divulging its anatomy to the ecosystem. To keep the covert buried is not how this story bends. The insects have always known their lineage of pollen, and the children of insects know too. May this secret war, its author of poisons, its professor of counterfeit treaties, kidnapper of honeybees, each iota of its polluted doing, may it all burn and blister under its own wickedness. So part of the U.S.'s intention to try to, confirm that this substance was a biological chemical weapon was so, like I said again, so that they could use it to leverage a case for building up their own arsenal and defense. Right? So then they could say, look, the Soviets are doing this, dropping this yellow rain thing, so we need to have a plan of deterrence in place, which means we got to go and invest more in bombs, weapons, and rebuild and restart the manufacture of biological chemical weapons, which had stopped. And so as a result of this controversy, the government went back to reproducing these weapons. And so in the middle of that, you have these refugees, and one of the key things that the government used to make its case was they would have refugees give up samples of their blood, their spit, their urine, whatever they could get from the refugees to then go and test. But the really unfortunate thing was that many of these samples, by the time they arrived into a lab in the United States, had already degraded, and so they weren't even able to be tested in a way that could allow for a credible result. So this next poem is a poem that explores the futility of that process, of the whole samples and testing process. Authorization to depart ravaged homeland as biomedical sample. Flew you afar, piecemealed bits of spleen, liver, tissues of the second gut, orphaned by the whole. Routed you in a vacutainer. Bangkok, Frankfurt delayed, Dulles, Fort Detrick, as if only born to serve in postmortem. Detain offerings of cerebral shards to be juried under a lens, flew you from the silken wilderness of your viscera. From all the vacated leftovers of yourself, sinews snipped, culled from the ribs. In this mission of guilt for your unleaving, you've trekked far from the village. Salvaged insides from you and other hundreds, sealed on letterhead, dispersed to the globe. Here at long last in these United States, you did not land a body, only as a vial of blood where you registered as urine did they label you asylum. Sample M3582, victim 7, en route to London. Fluids of you granted fair to enter refugee airspace while ending away in a hospital camp, stayed behind the source you and every else part. Sample M2582, victim 9, no weekend courier, ambiguously arriving. So stomach of lament, how could they not get you here somehow? Only drops relayed lab to lab to lab. Cargo of you quaking inside an ice chest. Yeah, so I'll share a few more here. So one of the things that happened in the whole Yellow Rain sort of fiasco was that as the investigation continued and as the United States was really keen again to make its case against the Soviets and to leverage and exploit the Hmong stories to make that case, there was a scientist out at Harvard who was really keen on disarming the world in a very sort of reasonable way, of course, but in order to do that, he had to discredit the Hmong stories and say Yellow Rain is not happening and that these refugees have no idea what they're talking about. Like, they don't know what's happening to them. And so his theory, and it's the theory that stands today, is that this yellow rain substance is simply just honeybee feces. So it's the poop of honeybees falling on refugees as they run through the jungles for their lives. And that is the theory that stands today with this yellow rain substance. And so the reason why it stands too is because it was something that the media picked up. There was this whole sort of scandal around it. And what ends up happening as a result of that is that you have one side claiming that this substance doesn't exist and these people are imagining it in order to de-escalate the war and to disarm the world. And then on the other side, you had this other group of people saying, yes, it's happening to these people. We need to leverage and exploit their story so that we can get more funding for weapons. And in the middle, you had the Hmong refugees themselves. So this poem is about the bees, right? Because why blame the bees? Everybody wants to just blame the bees. And so this is in defense of those bees. Allied with the bees. These people have been living in these areas for all their life, but they have never heard or experienced something like this before. Bees and honey are part of their life. They and their ancestors have traded honey for salt, clothes, and other goods for hundreds of years. And that's an epigraph that starts the poem and is from a letter to the editor by S. Yang, Long Beach, April 6, 1984. Tell them, child, we have hiked these hills without shoes long enough to hunt alongside the bees, memorizing the bend, pulse of their voices when they go dream inside the trees. We have been crowned with syrup of their toil so that our syntax might awaken to know its full range, compassed to the north, pristine as a nomadic butterfly. Tell them, daughter, we watched as they buried their queen, folding her into cashmere of her wings before swarming the body toward a fire of stars. And for days the forest keened a shadow lullaby. And for nights we listened for the bees only to uncover the hurried hush of our own stranded feet, falling forgotten as collateral beings. Tell them, Mintai, we are not misled in our anguish. What happened to the bees also happened to us. And I'll close with a poem. It's the last poem in the collection. Thanks again for being here, everyone, for listening. This is a poem for refugees anywhere and everywhere, and draws on this idea that it always seems that the refugees are just sort of brought into this world to wait for things to happen. Waiting for this, waiting for paperwork, waiting for things. And so that this poem draws on that idea of waiting. And yet still more. The refugees somewhere and everywhere are waiting. That the waiting suffocates the ankles, that the body cannot be fed from the waiting. That the spew of shrapnel from hubris tongues enact the waiting, that waiting is never certain of itself, that waiting could change its mind over morning, that waiting won't change its mind. That elbows cradle the waiting at night, that all are conceived and born into waiting. That the waiting can span the range of 2 continents, that waiting is a kind of forgetting, and forgetting is the sea. That waiting is a silent syllable and never mind, that even the dead wait, that waiting is not the same as faith, that not all waiting is created equal, that waiting drips from the sap hammer of a noose, that waiting turns to hunger, turns to water, turns to going, turns to too late. That a refugee somewhere is waiting, that a refugee everywhere is waiting. That waiting has no documentation of its history, that refugees carry a surplus of waiting in plastic bags, that the ancestors wait. That waiting is given to refugees as a disease is given to the blood, that refugees wait. That all waiting floats into the exosphere, that refugee fathers sit outside of high schools waiting for the bell. That landmines excel at waiting, that a sleeping refugee is still waiting even in a state of dreaming. That most waiting happens in daylight, that wait and home are not spelled the same, that the refugee industry is built on the business of waiting, that refugees are put somewhere to wait, that refugees are put everywhere to wait, that wait is the refugee, that a refugee is waiting, that waiting must go on, that there is yet more waiting, that wait still, and still more, that yet even, that next year, that the year after, that ever always, that more, that now, that wait is the refugee. Thank you all for reading.
Stress to follow both my partner and Chaun. I'm honored to be reading with them both, and Max, bear with us, okay? I'm also honored to be here. This is a beautiful space that has become sort of a second home for me. It's strange to think, but Josiah and Tom have really carved out their niche, and I'm going to buy some books. Not even ours, there's 5 books. So I'm going to be reading maybe a handful of poems, and I'm going to start with poems from my first book, which is thinking through the archive of the Southwest and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 to now, and all of the traumas, lynchings, and harms that happened in the peaceful acquisition. And it starts like any good poetry collection at a Walgreens. I was trying to get a passport photo. And then, run up to the 2016 election, and you know how that one turned out. And they wanted to know, the guy wanted to know what I was doing if I was running. And it's kind of actually helped propel the collection. Standing in line to take a passport photo, an old white man looks at me and claims I'm running. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in Ozokalo at 9. In line, I am a lot of things. And since I am a lot of things, I am everything he cannot imagine. A passport photo asks me to 2x2 myself and capture what I am in neutral, and I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turned husk. An old white man is not Gil Scott Heron saying, because I always feel like running, not away, because there is no such place. Is not how you pronounce exile or escapade. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo, claims I am afraid, no, I am a wall, no, I am a mirror, I am still, so still. One of the things when I'm talking through putting this reading together with Chaun and Miter, thinking about our archive and what the archive reveals to us as we agitate it, and doing that research, you realize that maybe some of the histories you thought you knew were just sort of the ones that had been perpetuated by like the larger narrative or the white narrative in many cases. One of them being the story of Joaquin Murrieta, who is sort of a bandit figure who in the Central Valley, where Miter and I are coming from. There's even a trail every year that they do to reenact this journey of this Robin Hood Pancho Villa character, who may or may not have existed, who also may or may not have been lynched, who also may or may not have been beheaded. And it was one of the things where I was doing the research, I'm like, oh, shit. I didn't even realize I knew like 20% of the story. So I'm going to read this poem titled La Corona, a Mexican Lynching, number 47. Anything can be trophy, just as anything can be ashtray, coffee cup, herb, flower pot, the inside of your wrist, the inside of another's wrist. Claim anything, anything. Witness, badge, halo, horn, colony, victim, vein, coffin, president, cadaver, the quiet breath of a body at rest. Claim, 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 anything. I'm so sorry if you don't came here for like happy poems, but my name is Chaun and that's not our forte. I'll read 2 more from this collection and then I'll jump over and it just gets dark. One of the things I thought I was going to do when I was writing this book, I thought I was writing like a historical piece that was like stuck to like 1848. But the longer I kept pulling that thread, the more I kept coming to the present day. So much so that I have the epigraph here from Jeff Sessions, the former U.S. Attorney General, who on February 12th, 2018, said this to the National Sheriff's Association. The office of sheriff is a critical part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. We must never erode this historic office. This poem is titled El Arpa, Mexican Lynching, number 53. One, the inheritance of the air is never a dandelion dispersal scattershot floating beyond fences growing elsewhere. Two, the inheritance of the elsewhere is a cave of collapse. Three, the cave of collapse is work. Four, the work is never inheritance of the heirs, or the heirs' heirs, as well as the heirs' heirs' heir. Five, the inheritance of repetition is a soundless gavel buried in a shallow grave. Six, the shallow grave is the redness of the bouquet a florist selects. Seven, the bouquet is leading into the quiet of a funeral. Eight, the quiet of a funeral is the Americas. Nine, the Americas is a platform built by the settlers, sheriffs, and miners for the lynching of the other. 10, the lynching is in the Vigilance Committee of NAFTA. Operation Wetback Maquiladoras ICE silences the agricultural prison industrial complex congressmen and U.S. presidents. 11, the silences is the gerrymandering of census data. 12, the census data is learning about the word incarceration with the storytelling project playing on public radio. 13, the incarceration is an ombligo of shirts and a forest of screams. 14, the ombligo is feeding again and never hungry. 15, the feeding is a church of excommunications inside a cage of teeth. 16, the cage of teeth is elected into office. 17, the elected are voting to eliminate whatever and everything. 18, the voting are no longer asking permission. 19, the permission is trafficking. 20, the trafficking is now asked to self-report. 21, the self-reporter is now asked to fill out a binary form in ink online. 22, the binary is seeking a fourth option during the election. 23, the election is a wall. 24, the wall is a type of silence. 25, the silence is a type of America. 26, the type of America is in the arrest. 27, the arrest is defined as cessation or stoppage of motion. 28, the cessation or stoppage of motion is in the fabric veiling the artifice. 29, the fabric veiling the artifice is a factory of harps. 30, the factory of harps is a maker of a stringless harp. 31, the stringless harp is the mute progeny. 32, the mute progeny is now the inheritance of the air. Maybe one more from this collection. That kind of, as I was exiting, I was thinking about how we take care of ourselves doing this work, or how sometimes I have to mask myself to enter into spaces where I don't know how I'm going to be presenting, either as a white man or a Mexican man. And I think this is kind of where this comes out. Buddha for exhaustion via mirror. Tell me how many days I'm unable to remain stone. I mask how many days I'm unable to remain stone. Tell me I am backward and upside down. I mask backward and upside down. Tell me about my own ways. I mask my own ways. Tell me a cathedral is not my desert bones. I mask my desert bones. Tell me my ancestors are not the astral-winged. I mask the astral-winged. Tell me to kindle agape prayers in swaddled ash. I mask agape prayers in swaddled ash. Tell me a canyon is not a space for me to fortress. I mask a space for me to fortress. Tell me I have no mask. I mask no mask. Tell me you don't know the shape of my grandmother's back. I mask the shape of my grandmother's back. Tell me to remove this mask. I mask this mask. Tell me I do not see from behind the mask. I mask you from behind the mask. Tell me to forget how my grandfather's memory lives in the spine of a whip. I mask how my grandfather's memory lives in the spine of the whip. Tell me the crevice is no place to garden heartbeats. I mask no place to garden heartbeats. Echo of veins. I mask the nearing echo of veins. As I transition to this other book, much of which I wrote, but I also want to give like an extra shout out to one of the young homies who's not so young anymore, who's growing into like her own beautiful artistry and writing. But I say this also in a very earnest way because didn't you like have a birthday
yesterday?
Yes, I was gonna say basically now. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Check out the paleta, things like that. So this other collection is thinking about annihilation, the Dust Bowl, and climate change. So like I said, very happy things. It starts with doom scrolling and seeing a logging machine remove a tree. And the title of the tweet was Cada día más cerca del fin del mundo, which translates to every day closer to the end of the world. In the scrolling, witness a logging machine annihilate a tree into parts. This is social media. 20 seconds, a buzzing fells strips the portions, the ones breathing into a quiet slumber. Echo amplification in rib cage affixed his crown in the fence coffin light. Of kindling, understanding the mechanisms of production. Know the automated is never of scarcity, but of mass replication. Acres never seized or ceased. My tongue slipped into the mind-hope desert, forest jungle cleaved into the flatness of the fabulous. Not a single trunk will, fuel fossil, outcome, transmittal, horizon. Left pile, 1.5 degrees centigrade corpus, no silent above outwork. Choking institutional pre-industrial kernel, landstone, levels error, atmospheric effluent, visible fall, debris well, denial plume, logic failure, epic obliterate, deprivation unfavorable, monitoring wholeness. Fuel fossil, land choking, no left. Fuel fossil, atmospheric debris, logic deprivation. Outcome stone, institutional silent pile. Outcome, effluent well. Failure unfavorable. Transmittal levels, pre-industrial above 1.5 degrees centigrade. Transmittal visible denial epic monitoring. Horizon error, kernel outward corpus. Horizon fall, plume, obliterate, wholeness. Where will whale? What was bird? Where forest? What ocean? Where living? Air. Part of the work, I wrote 15 poems in 15 days, looking at the archive of Dorothea Lange, who took photographs of the Dust Bowl. And I will read one of those 15 poems. Everywhere I sleep, I see Dust Bowl 12.0. With Dorothea Lange's photograph, US 99 on ridge over Tehachapi Mountains, heavy truck route between Los Angeles and San Joaquin Valley, over which migrants travel back and forth, California, May 1939. Fence, noun, early 14th century, action of defending, resistance, means of protection, fortification, shortening of defense. Go west, we went west. Remove, deport, or exterminate the people from their land. We removed, deported, and exterminated until it was our land. Subjugate for savings. We subjugated and profited. Reduce the land. We reduced the land and sowed. Sell what is sown. We sold at market. These are the prices. We accepted the prices. Pray for rain and harvest. We dreamt and others labored. Put down the rails and roads for speed. We put in the rails and roads and wanted faster. Put up the telephone poles to communicate. We erected poles and trenched cables and now phone in. Put up fences to prevent animals and possessions from straying. We put up fences and we never strayed. Every 2 minutes, y'all I have. Piso de pedra, piedra, floor of stone. There are things I want to do that I know I cannot. I have walked into my own dreams and made demands. Everyone laughed. I did not fly or wake or evaporate or burn. I sat and listened to the laughter. I am not surprised. I have tilled a desert, made grain, made God, made fruit. In the dream, I tell a boy the hourglass holds all the land and I cannot undo what I dismantle. He stares and doesn't laugh, offers his left palm that is split open. He says the whole takes what the whole takes. Maybe I am next, maybe you are, or maybe you're already on the other side. How a stone floor cracks to analog the stable. All right, I'm going to read the last poem from the collection now. Whales show up here too, so it's always a joy, strange joy to read here with Chaun in this conversation that we didn't know we were having, but we're all having. Years and years ago, I heard the poet, musician Saul Williams say that when we utter something into the universe, we're putting out there for others to have a dialogue whether they want to or not. And Chaun, we're having that dialogue, even though we knew each other anyway, we're still having dialogue. This is essentially a whale creature from the future trying to communicate back to whatever in the present or near future. Communicate 1.30b, the ancestral progeny of Megaterra Novaniae. Held you I once, beach, science, coroner incision, pressed index, middle, ring, wound, and saw, spinal exposure column. Say scientist disoriented mammalian blunt force wreckage. Say internet's less sight tree. Once held I you, waves I watch, wish you home, wish you home, wish you home. Less relent, more ness restful, tell now, greater than is not equal to greater than, not greater than, less than, greater than, no less than, greater than, no less than, greater than, less than, greater than, less than, less than. Lied man a once, less relent, more ness restful, bucket oiled himself, all bucket oiled, all, called okay, all gone, less relent, more ness restful, all you, this be home, stop, less relent, more ness restful, be this home, stop, less relent, more no ward home, this, you held once I, begin, you all, this, ward sky, land home, ness restful. Thank you. We're going to be around. If you guys have questions, or if you guys are talking about totally all okay, and hi, Instagram. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah! Get up, y'all, for Anthony, Cody, Dr. Vang, and Chaun Webster, and then this one here. We're waiting on a poem from you. No poems tonight?
Not yet.
All right. Y'all, we go up to the poets, tell them how much you like their poetry. Don't just mad dog them from across the room. And you don't have to leave. We're here for hours, so hang out, do your thing. Steve, was the volume okay?
The volume was fine. Yeah, you were here in the summertime, weren't you? I know, it isn't so wet. Oh, okay. I thought you were here in some at the last time. No, actually, somebody else said.
Yeah, we were like passing by earlier and then we came in just looking for the
Okay. Cool. Cool. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got there after reading. Right.
But it was great.
Nice. Yeah, we're gonna actually, I'm kind of running that reading tomorrow. Yeah.
I just
Yeah, the Zen Fair should be good, the whole day. Yeah, it's like 10 to 6 or something like that at City Hall. No, just tomorrow. Oh, tomorrow, yeah. And then tomorrow night here, there's a reading with Professor Acadera. He's visiting from Puerto Rico. Just kind of a surprise visit in the evening, but in the morning, Chaun and Anthony will read for the Poetry Center. No. It's completely open. It's for everybody. It's a big, bookshelf, publishing all over the place. A lot of people talking, a lot of people doing stuff. Yeah, the whole day. It's cool. They were doing it every year, and then the pandemic they stopped. And so it's the first year they're back on their feet. What's it called? It's called the Howard Zinn Book Fair. Yeah, there's a. I think I got it. Yeah, it's very cool. I don't know, Robin G.G. Kelly. It's like a black historian. He's like the featured speaker and stuff.
Where's that?
At City College, at the Zimbo Fair, yeah. So but it's his campus. It's over here on Wednesday. Yeah. You guys live around here?
I'm from San Jose.
Okay.
I'm from LA, but I live in San Diego.
Okay. Sort of around here. Yeah. It's a little drive these days.
I was just saying, I'm glad I came. I'm glad we stuck around. Like, if we had not, and we were like, if we had not.
It was weird. It was kind of just like a chance to
Yeah. Nice. They've got a busy day. I think this is the third thing they've done this week.
Yeah.
We got here just as the music was starting. This is like crazy. It's just on this like out of nowhere, and then we have the beats and stuff. So we're like, we took the rest of the album, and we're like, right back.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta find some things. It's a very cool bookstore. It's been doing it now for 2 years. We're gonna have, I think the 16th is their birthday party.
Oh yeah, they said that. The 16th, that's how they mentioned it. Yeah. They come back to doing the music.
Yeah.
They mentioned that.
Jump in. The video's still going. I'm Steve.
Brian. Yeah. Daniel. Good to meet you guys. Yeah.